What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Bad Batch Season 2, Part 2, second half of the season, episodes 9 through 16, and fairly solid end, if I'm being honest. And honestly, I wasn't really expecting it to be a cliffhanger leading into Season 3, but that's what they went with, and I don't know what to say. I mean, it's weird to me how much more mature the themes are tackled in these more kids shows. I mean, when you think about Clone Wars, when you think about Rebels, when you think about Bad Batch, compared to like Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett or Obi-Wan, it feels like these are the kids shows, and yet they're dealing with stuff that is a lot more mature, and the writing is a lot better, and it feels like the characters feel more real than the live action characters sometimes. So yeah, it's a very weird place that we find ourselves in with the current Star Wars universe. I guess it's not too surprising because, I mean, DC was kind of in the same boat, if we're being honest, where the cartoons are doing pretty well and the movies, the live action movies, are terrible. So yeah, it's not uncommon for this to happen, but for Star Wars, I was not expecting it to be this way, and it definitely is. So, gonna look at it the same way I did the first half of the season, piece by piece, because the first two episodes, once again, kind of connected. You've got the team is off doing a mission, trying to do more scavenging stuff for Sid, and then, of course, the ship gets stolen, and it kind of just shows where the team is now without Echo, trying to adjust to being a member down. And that leads into the second, or I guess in this case, the 10th episode, which, funny enough, I just considered it the Persona 3 episode, because I heard the one kid that stole the ship. I heard his voice. I'm like, that's Yuri Lowenthal. Know it 100%. I recognize his voice. And I went to look up just to make sure. I was like, all right, don't want to get too cocky. Am I right about this? I was right. The other kid that I don't remember, I think it was like Benny was the name of the kid that Yuri was playing. The other kid, I don't remember his name. Drake, for some reason, comes to mind, but I don't know that for sure. But it was the other kid that was constantly being the first place scavenger or whatever that was working for the, right, Mako, which I did find kind of funny, because to hear Yuri Lowenthal talking about Mako when Johnny was in Final Fantasy VII, I don't know, it's just funny little tie-in to hear him say Mako so much, but in a different frame. But yeah, the other kid's name was Drake, voiced by Alex Lee, who is actually voicing the current Persona 3 main character, where Yuri Lowenthal voiced the original Persona 3 main character. It kind of made me laugh. I'm like, it's almost it's like, Alex Lee is the better scavenger, and a lot of people, I think, prefer Alex Lee over Yuri Lowenthal as far as the main character voice. At least I kind of do. That's a whole different conversation, but it was just a funny little tie-in that, especially since I'm currently Let's Playing Persona 3 Reload, it made it a lot more funny for me. So, but yeah, those first two episodes, it was just kind of the team's adjusting to being a man down, and how are they handling it and all of that stuff. And also is setting up for what led into the 11th episode, which was Metamorphosis. This one was probably, it was the most unique episode, in my opinion, because it almost was set up like a horror episode in some ways, because of the whole like abandoned ship. It's been attacked. There's some creature in there that is clearly taking out the crew. And so when everybody shows up, the Bad Batch show up to scavenge, just knowing that creature's somewhere in there, the intensity of the scene building up to the reveal, it was very well done, especially considering this is not really a horror or thriller type of show. They did a really good job with that aspect of the episode. But the scavenging is where the focus kind of started, because they were building up toward this whole idea that maybe we shouldn't be working with Sid anymore. And that is something I'll talk about a little bit more as we get further down the episodes. But this is where the idea first gets brought up. She wants them to go scavenge the ship. They're not sure if they want to. There's not a whole lot of information about it. Obviously, she didn't help them in the previous episode, that she didn't help them whenever they lost their ship. So there was definitely a rift forming there. And Metamorphosis is the first episode where they did talk about what if we don't work for her anymore. But after episode 11, we get to episode 12. And this is where, once again, it was a sort of out of nowhere one-off episode involving Crosshairs. Just like they did with him and Commander Cody in the first half of the season, which I find very interesting, that both halves of the season just had that one random episode that was thrown in out of nowhere and Crosshairs involved. And they both ended up being my favorite episode of that half of the season. In fact, I think this one, which is called Outpost, was even better. Like, this one was so good. It really gave us a good glimpse into where Crosshairs is at the moment. We get to meet these other clones. We get to see how the clones are currently being treated after the whole debacle that happened with Rampart. And it was just a very solid episode, because I was really worried whenever this whole idea of Crosshair maybe thinking about turning against the Empire, maybe his loyalties are starting to change, after his whole ordeal with Cody. Where was his mindset? I was really worried it was going to be this just cheesy, oh, he decided there's good inside of him this whole time, and now he's going to go fight with the good guys. And that's not at all what they did. This episode, it is ultimately his turning point. The way that they do it is much more, again, it's more mature, it's more dark than I was expecting for this show. The way that they had him go out with this other clone whose name escapes me at the moment. I think it was Mayday. I'm pretty sure it was Mayday, actually. But this whole, they're trying to go on this mission to salvage all this stuff that was taken from them. They kill all the people in there, but they don't manage to get the stuff back. They barely make it out alive. He brings the guy back after he talked about, oh, I would just leave you behind. You're basically dead weight at that point. But, just that camaraderie and that feeling of we're fighting together. We're both soldiers here. We're both working toward the same goal. So now I'm going to help you because you helped me. And ultimately, what does that get him? Nothing. He gets back. The guy dies anyway because the one asshole general guy that was there doesn't get him help in time. And that moment is just so... It feels like a genuine... Yeah, I could see Crosshair turning because of this. It's a good reason for him to change his loyalty. And, for him to just shoot and kill the guy as well. That is not at all what I was expecting from, again, a kid's show. Because it feels a lot more adult in that sense. And maybe they are trying to play towards a, not necessarily like kids, but it does feel like they're trying to play more toward the older kids, more towards like the teenagers that are watching this. Because these themes are not themes that younger kids are going to understand. They're not going to watch the Outpost episode and understand what's going on. But I think teens, it's almost like comparing Teen Titans to Teen Titans Go. Teen Titans was a show for young adults, teenagers. And it felt like it was treating them with respect. It was treating them with maturity. Whereas Teen Titans Go is basically just for little kids. It's just a goofy show that they can laugh at and see funny colors and see stupid faces. And which is why a lot of Teen Titans fans hate that show, because it feels like you completely missed the point. But that's where I feel like the animated shows for Star Wars, they're not missing the point. They completely understand the assignment. They completely understand what they're here to do. They are here to treat these younger audience members with respect and give them stories that make them think and make them question. There's torture in this half of the season as well. So yeah, it's very well done. And The Outpost was a great start toward what ended up being a very good final, what would it be, 4 episodes? Yes, 4 episodes. So moving on from that, we do get to episode 13, which is Pabu. And of course, this is where we get what I believe is is the introduction for where this, maybe the 3rd season is going to go. this idea of what to do after, what comes after. These clones have been basically born and bred to serve and to be soldiers, but now they have a chance to do something else, to go and live in this society full of outcasts, full of people who have basically run away, and it's remote and it's hard to get to. I feel like this is kind of the end game, if you will, for the Bad Batch. Now, if that's actually going to happen, that's a totally other point, and it really depends on how dark this show wants to go, because I could see them building up this whole thing of like, yeah guys, here's this awesome place we can go live after all of this is said and done, and we've managed to save all these clones, and then they get to Pabu, and then the Empire shows up and absolutely wrecks it. So that is a possibility. But this episode, it was a good introduction for it. I will say the climax in this all right, I had to go look it up because my mind is so tired. I could not get climax out of my mind. And I'm like, why is that stuck there? It's because it does start with the C. The conflict of the episode was the whole just tsunami thing. I don't feel like you needed to have a conflict. I know it's more of an episodic show, so every episode has to have some thing that needs to be solved. But I don't know. It felt like you threw this whole thing in just so we could have an exciting action scene. And so we have an earthquake, we have a tsunami, we have to get everybody to safe ground, and then it leads to a rebuilding effort. It felt like it was more of a thrown in thing because, well, we got to have some sort of action or, again, conflict for this episode. So, yeah, they have to deal with earthquakes here and tsunamis, and there you go. But it's still, again, it's a good episode to set up what Pabu is, and, again, possibly an end game for these clones. So next up is episode 14, Tipping Point, and this is where things really start to get going for this final part of the season. You have Echo showing up with all of the information. You have Crosshair breaking out of his restraints and trying to get a message out. You have all of this just exciting action. We get to see what Echo and Rex have been up to this whole season. So it was a really, really good setup, and again, it gives us that information we need to set up for the final 2 episodes, which I think is very smart. If we just jumped into the final 2 episodes without any sort of build up to it, kind of what happened when I think about the first half of the season, where it was just a bunch of nonsense, random stuff happening, and then all of a sudden it was, oh, we're here at the mid-season finale, and we've got something exciting happening. So I think it was a good decision to do that. But on top of that, one thing I haven't talked about yet, because I did want to save it for a little bit, is Hemlock being introduced as a villain. We saw a little bit of him at the end of the first half of the season. He really starts to come into his own here in this episode. And he was in most of these episodes throughout the second half of the season. First of all, the fact that it's the guy that played Mary Lightly from Psych, really funny. And I can hear it too whenever he talks, because I'm just like, I recognize that voice. He just sounds like a more creepy version of him, which is funny because Mary was already kind of creepy in that show. But he's a great villain. You can tell, first of all, I still have a feeling that the whole cloning project that he wants Lama Say to work on, I have a feeling that it involves what happened with Snoke and the fact that we saw clones of Palpatine. I feel like that's what this is leading towards, in which case, I get it. Disney created this whole plot hole whenever they introduced their sequels, and so they're like, well, we want to make sure we make the connection between the originals and the sequels, so we're going to have these little shows that can fill in the gaps as to, well, why did Palpatine clone himself? Well, the clones already existed, so there's a guy looking into that process, and I don't know. If that's what they're doing, fine, whatever. But Hemlock as a villain, fantastic. Really well written, really intimidating, and you can just tell he's almost always in control. And he's also one of those, I really like those villains that they are in control, but they also are shooting for something higher, and it's in those moments when if they're like a part of an organization, and they're dealing with people above them, they're dealing with people that have more power than them. Those are the types of villains that I really enjoy, because it feels like they are so in control and they are so, you can't touch me right now. But then whenever you see them in the organization, how low they are, like when he's dealing with Tarkin, that's where you get to see a little bit of his vulnerability. And I really like those scenes, and I like, again, villains that are set up like that. Fantastic. But after Tipping Point, we jump into the 15th episode, which is Summit. And this is, of course, talking about the summit that the Empire is having. And it was a really, again, solid episode. And it builds up to the finale so well. Because you've got all these pieces that are set in place. You see how everybody is getting to these positions. The fact that they bring in Saw Gerrera again, just to have him be sort of a flaw in the plan. You know, they had this really ingenious plan set up to where they could track Hemlock's ship and get to where he's holding the clones and all of that. Brilliant plan. So to have Saw Gerrera show up and he's the flaw, you can't predict that. And sometimes, you know, how you have the Deus Ex Machina sometimes show up and something you couldn't have predicted shows up and saves the day. Sometimes it's just as fun to have it work in reverse, where it's a Deus Ex Machina for the villains, where this other good guy who's more intent about just killing everybody screws everything up, and now the clones are set in this really bad situation that they have to get out of alive. And that, of course, brings us to the final 16th episode for the season, Plan 99. And this is where I liked it. It was really good. I don't know where season 3 is going to go from here, though. I mean, you start off with Tech sacrificing himself and referencing Plan 99, which I'm guessing is the, you know, for the good of the team. Your life doesn't matter as long as the team succeeds or something. They didn't really expand upon that. They did talk about just how Tech basically put the team's needs over his own type of thing. The thing is, it's hard to say, because if this were anything else, if this were any other form of media, I would say, well, no body, he's not dead. We didn't find his body. We didn't see him actually die. He's not dead. However, it's also a kid's show. So it's hard to say, because sometimes in kids shows, that is how they die. You don't see the body. They just fall to their death and they're dead. So it's hard to say. Because in anything else, I could see, well, he fell, but maybe he fell in water. Maybe, you know, there was something on the way down that he managed to get snagged on. Maybe he survived some other way. Yeah, I would be thinking about all these things. We didn't see his actual body. We didn't see him actually physically die in front of us, so he could still be alive. But again, it's a kid's show. So there's a chance, well, maybe they didn't want to show one of the main characters dying on screen. Again, I know it's not little kids, so they're probably a bit more willing to show one of the main characters die on screen. But it's still hard to say for sure. So I don't know where that's going to go. The one problem I did have, I said I would bring it up later, Sid. I think Sid was very poorly handled in the second half of the season. They referenced in the racing episode how she's got a darker past, who she claims to be is not who she actually is, all that stuff. So it felt like they were building up toward maybe she's got some darker history, maybe she will turn on the team at some point. They were building that up. The way they did it felt very odd. Because you've got the team talking about cutting ties. You've got the one episode, I think it was in the Pabu episode, when they were working with, what's her name? Fee, I think. They were working with Fee, and then they get that message where Sid basically threatens them for cutting ties with her. And then after the crash and everything that happens after the summit, they take Omega back to Sid to heal up, even though she already threatened them. And then they come back, and then she turns them in anyway. And it just kind of feels like there's a lack of connectivity in this storyline. It feels like they were putting the pieces in place to show, well, Sid's going to betray them for money, but we didn't really get to see that. Like, if the team had not cut ties with her, if the team hadn't gotten that threatening message from her, I feel like this could have been a lot more of an impactful scene. But as it is, it feels like Sid's just kind of a jackass who, oh, you bring Omega here because she's nearly dead? Well, cool. I guess I'll make some money off of you guys. Awesome. And it just doesn't feel like that's what they were trying to show with Sid's character. I mean, we even saw in that racing episode, she said, I'm not that person anymore. So it kind of felt like this could have been she did want to turn them in, but maybe she changed her mind because, there's that connection there. It did feel like she was forming a genuine connection with Omega. So it feels weird that she would just, all right, they're back after I threatened them. Omega's hurt. Time to call the Empire and make some money. It didn't feel quite right, but it does lead to what ultimately sets up pretty well for season 3, where Omega's now been captured. She's there with Crosshairs, who is still subdued and really struggling after all of the torture they did to him. And then, of course, the rest of the Bad Batch. You've got Hunter, Wrecker, and Echo still. They're all going to be working to get her back. So I think it's a really good, solid setup for season 3. Again, still don't know what they plan to do, but it's exciting. And I don't think it's my favorite animated series. I think if I had to rank them so far, it would probably be Clone Wars for the most part. If you take off like the first 2 seasons, it would definitely be Clone Wars. I think Rebels is just underneath that, and then it would be Bad Batch. It's very close though. Like, it's not, when I think about like the live action when I think about the live action Star Wars shows, it's like Mandalorian, Andor, and then very clearly Obi-Wan somewhere in here, and then Boba Fett is just all the way down. Like there's no, oh, it's so close. These shows are all really good. All of the animated shows are fantastic, but I do think this one is slightly lacking. And the only reason I say that is it does sort of feel like there are certain episodes, again, like the opening episode for this, when they're on that planet, there are moments that feel like, okay, it was good, but I feel like they could have done maybe a little bit more. Everything to do with Benny and Mako and Drake and all of that, all of the kids there, it feels like you're building up towards something maybe a bit more epic. And it kind of just turns into, okay, well, the kids find out Mako's been siphoning off money elsewhere and not giving them their cut. And so they turn on him. Okay, like that's kind of it. And Pabu, again, it was a good episode to introduce this world that they could possibly live on in the future. But then it feels like, well, we need to shoehorn in some sort of action adventure thing to happen. So Tsunami. So it feels like some episodes, they're good, but they could be better. There's certain little things that they could do or directions they could take the episodes that I think could improve them a little bit more. Whereas I think about, with Rebels, with Clone Wars, most of those episodes were just really solid. Outside of, obviously, again, with Clone Wars, you cut out the first 2 seasons, cut out any of the Jar Jar episodes. Pretty much every episode was really good. And with Rebels, there were a few hit or miss here or there. You had your episodes that were focused on like the droids and stuff. But a lot of those episodes, even the ones that were more filler episodes, were still a lot of fun, really well written. So I think all in all, though, as far as Bad Batch is concerned for season 2, I think it was really good. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the second half of the season and the season as a whole? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Bad Batch reviews. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I will talk to you all later. Peace out.